Hello everyone, thank you so much for clicking on today's video and welcome to my channel. In today's story, OP reaches out to Reddit because her friend who's visiting her country had an unfortunate incident during Holi and his clothes were ruined, and now she feels like she's the a-hole for how she handled the situation. Unfortunately, things take a very dark and twisted turn in the update, so do stay tuned for that to find out what happens. I do hope that you enjoyed this story. If you do, I would really appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up. And before we move on to the story, I just wanted to take a second and thank all of my subscribers. Thank you so much, you guys are the best. For those that are new here, if you do like my content and would like to support me, I would really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button. Anyways, thank you so much for your time and on to the story. Am I the a-hole for not defending my friend when his expensive new clothes got ruined? I, a 23-year-old female, live in India and had a friend, a 24-year-old male. Let's call him Joe, visiting from New York this week. Today was Holi, which is a massive festival in India where people douse each other in color and water to celebrate. It's also fairly acceptable that anyone is fair game on Holi, whether you're throwing water balloons from your balcony or chucking colors from the street. People douse random strangers and everyone enjoys it. Joe had another friend living in my city who invited him and me to a quote-unquote proper Holi celebration. We both got ready in the morning. I was wearing an old night suit and Joe had dressed up in a newly bought very expensive looking kurta. He gave me a very judgmental look and asked whether it was appropriate for me to go to his friend's party dressed in old, ragged clothes, especially when his friend said that it would be a proper party. I laughed and explained that not only were we going for a Holi party, but we would also have to walk on foot to reach the friend's house, and whatever clothes we were wearing were bound to get ruined. Joe still looked a bit annoyed but didn't say anything further. Cut to 20 minutes later and we got out of the car and began the short 5-minute walk to Joe's friend's house. A bunch of teenagers ambushed us out of nowhere, and within seconds we looked like walking rainbows and were utterly drenched. I laughed, picked up some of the kids' water balloons and chucked them at them. But Joe got incredibly mad and started screaming at the kids about how expensive his clothes were, how they ruined them, and how they had to reimburse him. The kids could see that he was angry, but said to me in Hindi that they didn't understand what he was saying. I told Joe that and also reminded him that I had warned him about this, and that it's a very accepted part of the culture here. Something people do not get upset about. Joe got mad at me and told me to explain to the kids that they had to apologize and cough up the money for his clothes. I refused and Joe walked off in a huff. The party went great. It was a typical Holi bash and Joe and I immediately fit in, being already covered in water and color, and I thought all was fine now. However, when we got back to my house, Joe got really mad at me about refusing to defend him, making him feel isolated and alone in a foreign country, and imposing my culture in an uncomfortable manner without respecting the fact that he's a tourist. I told him that he was being unreasonable and went to bed. However, later, a few of our mutual American friends also texted me that I was being an a-hole about the situation. I didn't think I had done anything wrong, but now I'm starting to suspect that I might be an a-hole for not understanding and respecting that my friend might not be comfortable with such traditions and that he had spent a lot on these new Indian clothes. One Redditor asked for more information. They say, "What exactly did you tell him about Holi? Was it as vague as your clothes might get ruined, which implies that he might be able to opt out of it or escape it? Or did you specifically say that people will feel comfortable throwing dye on you without warning, so anything you wear will get covered in colorful powder and liquids?" To which OP replied, "I made it specifically clear that whatever clothes we were wearing that day would get ruined, whether at the party or on the street. Somehow, some way, it would happen." Another Redditor said, "Not the a-hole. Joe is the a-hole and you know that. He was warned, judge you for your outfit, and then got mad when everything you said happened. I will also take a moment to apologize on behalf of Joe for his atrocious behavior as an American visiting a foreign country." To which another Redditor replied, "This, not the a-hole. OP should respond back to the friend saying, if you invited a guest from out of town to a water balloon fight and then you saw that they were wearing expensive fabrics that would be ruined if they got wet, so you told them to change and they didn't, would you feel bad if their clothes got wet and ruined? Probably not, because they wore something inappropriate and ignored you when you told them that their clothes would get ruined. Just like what happened with Joe. I mean, should I have wrestled him to the ground, beat him, and forced new clothes on him? I warned him. He was an adult and he made that choice." To which OP replied, "I might just do that. I was pretty annoyed about the incident, so I've been in my room since. However, I think that I'll message them to understand more about what they know and explain the situation to them." So it turns out that there's a lot more to the story. Quite a lot more. I kicked Joe out of my house today and he will never be a part of my or my friend's life ever again. I made a group with everyone besides Joe, and as soon as I started texting them, it became clear that Joe had fed them utter nonsense. He told them that I had pressured him into going shopping, telling him that wearing ethnic clothes was a necessity. Not only had I taken him to a very high-end brand, but I had also pushed him to buy the most expensive items. I immediately clarified the situation to my friends, and that's when a much darker truth began to emerge. We had a group of about 10 friends who met at university in the States and are a very diverse group. We're Indians, Brazilians, Chinese, Nigerians, Spanish, Americans, etc. We also became friends over a shared love of traveling and committed to visiting each other's home countries after graduation. Post-graduation, we were fortunate enough to all land really high-paying jobs, and traveling was a hobby we chose to use our surplus income on. The difference was Joe and Cameron, who had, let's just say, very expensive trust funds waiting for them. While we all traveled quite a bit, it was Joe in particular who traveled the most. In fact, he has already visited most of our friends. I was the second to last left. Turns out his actions were a pattern. He takes some aspects of a culture, acts on it, and then throws a fit about other aspects he doesn't like. He gets red envelopes for Chinese New Year, has a fit about a fire phobia when lighting lanterns, goes to Brazil for Carnival, throws a fit about being asked to dress accordingly, etc. None of us had mentioned this before to each other because the general perception was that Joe was a good guy and well-traveled, etc., and that it was just a one-off incident. The worst part, though, was that this only happened with his friends of color. No issues when he went for La Tomatina or Oktoberfest. I decided to confront Joe this morning, and at first he denied it. But when I showed him the group messages, that's when he lost it. He went on a rant about how all non-white cultures were amusing and exotic, and he didn't mind it, but he hated how we always forced him into barbaric and disgusting parts of our tradition. He said that he had an issue with it, and that we were killing his love for travel, and how much better our friends in Europe had been. I told him to get out of my house instantly, and when he refused, saying that he had nowhere to stay, I had my driver take his luggage out. I told the rest of the group about this, and we were all equally shocked and hurt and are cutting him off entirely. To all the lovely people who commented on how fun Holi sounds, please come to India in March. People would love to celebrate with you. So guys, what do you think about this? I'd be really interested in hearing your take, because I do think that there are two sides to the story, and I personally lean towards one side. Now, the first side is that Joe's in the right. He feels like there are some parts of the tradition that he's not comfortable with and he doesn't want to participate in it, which to some extent is understandable. But the other side is that if you're taking the time to intentionally visit a specific culture, that you need to respect all aspects of that culture. And personally, that's a side that I fall on. Now, taking the fact that Joe was probably an inherent racist to the side, I do feel like if there were certain aspects of the culture that Joe was uncomfortable with, that first of all, he should have educated himself with all aspects of the culture Now, you can't be 100% right about everything, but that being said, you can find a lot of information on the internet nowadays, and Joe had a friend who was a native to the country, so he could have asked them any questions that he wanted. Instead, he chose to go in his ignorance. Like, come on man, you're in the 21st century. I am so glad that OP decided to tell her friends the truth and that they were able to figure out how Joe really was on the inside. Anyways, I really enjoyed the update, and I think that they made the right decision. I do hope that Joe uses this as an opportunity to maybe reevaluate his thought process about everything. Anyways, I'd be really interested to know what you guys think about this. Please let me know in the comments down below. If you did like this, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a thumbs up. And please subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories from Reddit with updates.